Hello, and welcome to my podcast, A Brain Tumour Survivor's Guide to Life. My name's Stuart Hanna. This podcast charts my experience with a double brain tumour diagnosis. It is intended to be a guide through the brain tumour journey for those who have a tumour and those curious about what happens if you or a family member do get a diagnosis. I got through my brain tumour surgery with positivity and humour, and I want to share that with you. This podcast is in aid of the Brain Tumour charity, who are a big help to my family and I as we entered this new and strange world of brain tumours and brain surgery. I hope you enjoy it. The natural reaction to the news that you have a brain tumour is fear, of course. I didn't have to wait long from initial diagnosis to my formal diagnosis that my tumours were not terminal, at least not in the immediate future, but I was still frightened by the many unknowns that lay ahead. In this episode, I want to stress the importance of asking lots of questions of your neurosurgeon. Knowledge is key to overcoming fear. I used to be terrified of flying in the past. I would hear this sound, which was probably just someone wanting another gin and tonic, but my brain would react as if it was something more like this sound.
Pull up, pull up, pull up.
These days, I love flying, and I got to this point by learning everything I could about planes and flying. I did the same with my brain tumours. I don't love them, of course, but I'm no longer afraid of them. Episode 14. A Fear of Flying. As I approached my first operation to remove one of my two brain tumours, there was so much that I didn't know about what would be happening to me that my immediate reaction was fear. By the time that my operation day came, I was able to be calm, cheerful in fact, something I've discussed in earlier podcasts. I've mentioned before that finding stoicism was a huge help, but it wasn't the only thing that helped. The other discovery that I made was the power of knowledge over fear. I read somewhere about the belief that many of our fears, flying, operations, dentists, etc., come from a fear of the unknown. The first big fear in my life that I had to conquer was a fear of flying. I actually thought that I loved flying when I first flew in 1985, the year I got married, when I had the chance to travel to Malta for a product launch. On the outbound trip, someone else in the group offered to drive the minibus to the airport, which meant that I could drink with the rest of the group. So it was a slightly squiffy Stuart that boarded the plane. I loved the thrill of takeoff, the beauty of the blue sky when we were above the clouds, and the amazing views of Malta when we were on approach to land. For the return trip, I was volunteered to be the driver when we arrived back, as I was the youngest, and therefore would be the least tired, was the theory. This meant that I didn't drink before the flight. My experience of flying this time was horrific. Takeoff was terrifying, and as we banked to set course for home, I felt like we were going to fall backwards out of the sky, despite the fact that in reality we were probably already moving forward at over 180 miles an hour. This was now a problem, as within a couple of months I would be flying to Italy for our honeymoon. So on top of the terror of the groom's speech, I was now quietly stressing about the flight. Our wedding day arrived, and amazing as it was, the groom's speech nearly made me throw up. These days, some grooms refuse to make a speech, and I don't blame them. Then came the flight to Italy for our honeymoon. As expected, it was awful, and I had to quietly zone out to remove myself from the situation, my coping mechanism for flying that I used for a good few years, and I didn't want to spoil the excitement for my gorgeous new wife. I've never let my fear of flying stop me from travelling anywhere, but it spoilt the start and end of many family holidays. I somehow managed to hide my fear from our kids, as I didn't want them to be scared too. Something else flying taught me was to never show weakness, especially to your friends. Some people, especially male friends, can be pretty merciless when they discover your weaknesses, and on one business trip in the late 1980s a large group of us toured France in order to visit all of the production facilities of the company that we worked for. Every damn takeoff was accompanied by lots of foes screaming about crashing. Bastards. I did get some justice though on one of these mates. Chris and I decided to go up the Eiffel Tower on one of our free days, so we took the two little lifts to the main viewing platform. I walked out and looked out over Paris, through the anti-jump mesh of course, and said something to Chris about the view but got no reply. When I turned to see where he was, all I could see were the tips of his fingers gripping the door frame and Chris's eyes peering out. I wandered back over to him and asked what was wrong. I can't come out, I just can't, he replied, which made me laugh very loudly. Oh, so you're Mr. Brave when it comes to flying, but you're scared of this. At least this is bolted to the ground. I never let him forget that. As my career progressed, I was required to fly with increasing frequency, so I decided that I needed to somehow conquer this fear of flying. I researched everything I could about flying, how airliners are flown, what the procedures are that pilots follow when on flights, and instead of zoning out with some music, I listened to the aircraft, to what noises they made, when in a flight to expect them and what they were. With my growing knowledge and familiarity, I felt the fear steadily reducing until I suddenly realised that I was now actually enjoying the experience and was now one of the relaxed people chilling in departures. With this newfound knowledge, I would find myself grinning like a big kid as the flight crew pushed the engines to full thrust for takeoff, and you got that kick in the pants as the brakes came off. The thrill of watching the world whiz by, and that amazing feeling of freedom from ordinary life as the aircraft's nose pitches up and begins its climb into the sky. Fantastic. I wasn't even bothered the time when, just after pushback at Copenhagen Airport, we had to pause on the apron to let an engineer on board, who after some rather alarming hammering cleared us to take off. And let's be honest, no one wants their aeroplane fixed with a hammer. Another thing that I discovered as I transitioned from a scared flyer to someone who loves it is that you can easily forget what it is like to be scared of it. On another trip to Denmark with a work colleague, I noticed my good mate Phil gently tapping his finger on the underside of the tray table in front of him. When he saw me notice this, he explained that he had seen someone about his fear of flying, and one of the coping mechanisms they taught him was tapping under the table. This was to enable him to subconsciously feel that he was in fact keeping the aircraft in the air. I thought it was a great idea, but a few minutes later I completely forgot our conversation. In my excitement about a low approach over Copenhagen, I blurted out, "Wow, look at that view, we are really low." Phil gave me a very dark look and started tapping his finger frantically under the tray table again and replied with a curt, "No thanks. I can be such an insensitive doof sometimes." By the way, a travel tip for you. When passing through Kastrup Airport, you can't go through without visiting Steph's hot dog stand. That would be illegal, where you can get a very good priced hot dog and pint of lager. On yet another flight to Copenhagen, I discovered that another of my colleagues, Ritu, was not a great flyer. The final approach into Copenhagen's Kastrup Airport is over open water leading to the North Sea on one side and the Baltic Sea on the other, so it's frequently windy, as you can imagine. On this flight, it was a day when it was extremely windy on approach, and on the route from Birmingham to Kastrup, it is normal with SAS Airlines to fly on a reasonably small plane, in this case the Bombardier CRJ 900, with only 2 seats on either side of the aisle. As we descended, I looked across at Ritu, who was gripping the arms of her seat and looking very alarmed. What she couldn't see was that we were approaching the runway threshold almost sideways on, something that I could see through the window on her side of the plane. As usual with that kind of landing, the pilot flying waited until the last moment before lining up the aircraft with the runway and cutting power. We hit the ground with a loud bump, and Ritu looked very pleased to be down. Without question, my favourite aircraft is the enormous Airbus A380, a double-decked beast that makes the Boeing 747 look small. We've flown on A380s many times on our trips to New Zealand, both with Emirates and Qantas. One flight that I especially remember was on an Emirates A380, flying the last 7-hour hop from Dubai to Birmingham. We left New Zealand basking in the summer sunshine, but back in the UK it was the depths of winter with a huge snowstorm that had blanketed the UK. This was the beast from the east. As we crossed the English coast, our pilot announced that we were in a holding pattern over the south of England to give Birmingham Airport time to clear the runway of snow, but not to worry as we had plenty of fuel and plenty of coffee. After about 20 minutes, I felt the plane accelerate, but the pilot immediately made another announcement that the good news was that we could land, but the bad news was that we were being diverted to Manchester Airport. This was a real pain, as Birmingham is a 2-hour drive from Manchester, especially in bad weather, and of course our damn car was in Birmingham. So we would all be put in taxis for a terrifying high-speed drive on a snow-covered M6. Although Manchester Airport's runway is still open, the weather was appalling, and I warned my wife that we could be in for a rough landing. When it comes to flying, my wife always used to be the confident one, but now it is her that gets worried, and my little announcement didn't help. Despite her size, our A380 was bouncing around like a toy, and in another moment of classic Stewart insensitivity, I had my in-flight entertainment screen set to view the CCTV camera mounted in the plane's tail fin. This unfortunately gave a perfect view of the runway lights which were jumping around the screen as the plane bounced around on our approach. There were a lot of nervous looking people on that plane, apart from me sitting there with my inane grin on my face, and my wife was now holding hands with the woman sat next to her that she'd not met before the flight. We slowly descended, and after a while I realised that not only should we have landed by now, I could also hear the sound of the engines spooling back up. "I think we're going around again," I said, which did not cheer my wife and her new buddy up one bit. Sure enough, we heard the loud clunk of the wheels retracting as the nose of the plane finally pitched up and the huge machine began to climb back into the sky. I calmly pointed out that the pilot would not put us at risk, and go arounds are no big deal. In fact, we've landed many times in windy Wellington, New Zealand, and not had to go round despite this being commonplace for Wellington Airport. We came in again, this time with my screen off, and this time the pilot nailed it, and there was a cheer from some passengers as the wheel touched down. I never doubted the pilot for a second. So how have I gone from gripping the seat arms wetting myself to enjoying rough landings in a blizzard? Knowledge is the secret. I knew that flying was always going to be a part of my life, both because of my work demands and because of having a daughter, and now grandkids, living in New Zealand. So I set about learning every aspect that I could about flying an airliner. I watched endless takeoffs and landing videos on YouTube, and there are actually channels for this. I watched air crash investigators on TV, which might sound odd, but you soon realise how safe flying is by the long time gaps between major incidents. I once saw an episode about a Boeing 747 which tumbled about 22,000 feet before the crew recovered it and landed. If they can survive that, you know that you're safe. Also, there is the blindingly obvious fact that neither the flight crew or cabin crew would go to work every day if they thought for 1 second that they wouldn't be coming home. Apart from lifts, flying is the safest way to travel, safer than cars by a long way. So, what has all this rambling got to do with brain tumours? When I got the call from my GP to say that an MRI had found 2 brain tumours, I couldn't help but be stunned by this news. In that first call, they couldn't even tell me what tumours I had. We found ourselves sitting quietly trying to take it all in, this news that had changed our lives. I do remember feeling very calm the next morning. My wife and I sat quietly sipping our morning coffee together. She asked me how I felt, and to be honest, I'd got my mind into a place of acceptance. That is, if this is the beginning of the end, then I feel that I've been lucky enough to have had a good life. I worried not for me, but for her and our children, but I took comfort in knowing that our adult kids are well equipped to stand on their own 2 feet, and they would be there for my wife. I've written about my first consultations with my neurosurgeons and blogged about them, and also spoken about them on earlier podcasts, but the key thing that we did was ask a lot of questions, the good, the bad and the ugly, so that we had as few surprises as possible. With the information that my surgeon provided, I could approach my operation calmly and optimistically. I think that if I was asked for advice on how to cope, I would say, take what you know and plan for your best life post-operation. If the prognosis is terminal, then you don't have a moment to waste, of course. You need to cram a lifetime into the time you have. If the consequences of surgery and treatment are going to be life-changing, then get planning and get your plans in line with the predicted outcome rather than dwell on how unlucky you feel. Focus on being adaptable and outmanoeuvring your enemy within, so you can retain a feeling of control over your circumstances. I've also discussed online with other tumour warriors the subject of not letting your hospital become this fantasy chamber of horrors in your mind. Hospitals are staffed by people who just want the best outcome for you. If you are on your brain tumour journey already or have just started, remember that old adage that knowledge is power. Not knowledge from Dr. Google, but from your neurosurgeon, from NHS online resources if you're in the UK, from charities such as the Brain Tumour Charity, and of course through groups of fellow brain tumour warriors online. Arm yourself with knowledge and don't be a victim of your tumour, be a survivor. Make a plan, work around the problem and focus on what you can control and maximise those aspects of your life. Try to find a way to accept that you can't control everything, so that the parts that you cannot change are just a part of your life now. Your new life is boarding now. With this knowledge and way of thinking, you can let go of the fear and enjoy life's long-haul flight with positivity, gratitude for the good things that you still have in your life, however small, and laugh in the face of adversity. It's time to head to the departure lounge for your new life journey. Take care. By the way, like me, over 12,000 people each year in the UK and an estimated 300,000 worldwide suddenly discover that they have a brain tumour, and from the moment that they receive that news, their lives will never be the same again. This podcast has been created to try and raise funds for the Brain Tumour charity, who've been a big support to my family and I. As well as offering support to individuals and families, they fund life-saving research in the hope of ending the harm done by brain tumours. If you can help in any way, big or small, please go to www.justgiving.com/fundraising/Stuart-Hannah, that's Stuart-Hannah, and make a donation. Thanks.